Let's turn now to Klaus Larres. He's a distinguished professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and a fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center here in Washington. Great to see you again, Klaus. Now, Trump's comments undermine the assumption that give Article 5 its power. Talk more about Article 5 and what it's for.
Well, Article 5, of course, was born in the Cold War. It was directed against the Soviet Union when there was danger that the Soviet Union would invade Western Europe, particularly Germany, of course, but also other countries in Western Europe. So Article 5 was invented to make sure that the alliance would stick together and that each country felt responsible for the whole of the alliance. So if one country gets attacked, then all countries will feel attacked and will come to the aid of the attacked country. It actually is voluntary. It's not a binding commitment, but even the United States at the time, and there also at that time was a bit of an isolationist trend in American foreign policy, even the United States said that they would come to the aid of that country which had been attacked. But what kind of aid? That was left open. Would it be military aid? Would it be financial aid? Would it be something much milder? But everyone understood, so it was not put down in writing, but everyone understood that it meant military counter-attack and military aid.
And Trump's suggestion that the US would not protect NATO allies failing to spend enough on defence indicates that, you know, there's somehow some discrepancy in the way that NATO is funded. Tell us how NATO does raise its funds, and how many NATO members meet the defence spending target.
Well, Trump, of course, has a point, and many American presidents and defense ministers have had a point and complained about the lack of European spending on defense. There actually is not a common NATO budget. Every country has its own defense budget and spends its money on defense. But the commitment was in 2014, again, a voluntary commitment, that each country, each alliance member would spend 2% of its GDP on its national defense. Many countries have fulfilled that promise. Some countries have not. By the end of this year, more or less half of all NATO members will have met that commitment of 2%. That is still not 100%, as there should be. And so the complaint by Trump and others that Europe is still not spending enough on its defense is quite true. But the Europeans are getting their act together, particularly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2020.
And in response, NATO leader Jens Stoltenberg says Trump's comments put allies at risk by saying Russia can, quote, do whatever they want. Is that true? How might Russia interpret his comments, do you think?
Well, I mean, this clearly has rocked the alliance. I don't think that Putin will feel encouraged to attack a NATO country only because Trump says something which is clearly silly and unhinged. No American president, no NATO alliance member has ever said something like that. It is doubtful whether Putin really wants to run the risk of attacking a NATO country. But coming out with such a statement is, of course, very, very strange. And one can only explain it in the way that Trump is in the middle of an election campaign. He wants to convince his very isolationist supporters that he will be tough on the Europeans and he will make the Europeans spend more money on defense. Whether he really wants to come across as an ally of Putin, as being really not caring about the Europeans and the NATO alliance, we don't know. We know for sure that when he was president, that he had the intention to withdraw the United States from NATO. His national security advisors at the time, John Bolton and McMaster, and also the Defense Secretary Mattis, they in the end persuaded him not to withdraw the United States from NATO. So that he kind of meant what he said, I think cannot be doubted. Whether he would go as far as to actually, in reality, encourage Putin to attack a NATO member, that of course is questionable. But the American commitment to NATO under a new Trump presidency would be very much questionable. And that worries the Europeans. And I understand that they're all making contingency planning for what to do when Trump comes back as president. Clearly, the Europeans, the NATO alliance, will be at risk, and the Europeans will have to form some sort of their own defense alliance, and they cannot rely on the United States as much as they could for the last 50 years.
All right, Klaus Larres, as always, great to get your insight. Thank you.